Hello, and welcome to this eSchool News webinar. The E-rate program is getting an update. What do you need to know? My name is Chris Hobson, and I'll be moderating this event. I am the Custom Content Manager for eSchool News, and I'm excited to have you join us for what should be a very informative session. Today's webinar is sponsored by Aruba, a Hewlett-Packard Enterprise company. Aruba is a leading provider of next-generation networking solutions for enterprises of all sizes worldwide. The company delivers IT solutions that empower organizations to serve the latest generation of mobile-savvy users who rely on cloud-based business apps for every aspect of their work and personal lives. Before I introduce our presenters, I'd like to take a minute to go over some features of the platform that we're using for this webinar. Today's event will be recorded, so you don't have to worry about missing a thing. Within a few days, you'll receive an email message that contains a link to the recorded webinar, along with a PDF of the slides. You can submit questions at any time during the presentation by clicking on the Q&A box. Peter Kaplan will be online answering your questions. There will also be time at the end of the presentation for our panelists to address additional questions. Also, there's a group chat function that you can launch by clicking on the chat. Feel free to use this feature to chat amongst yourselves or to contact someone from the eSchool News team if you have a technical question. But please use this feature to ask questions. Do not ask questions of our speakers. If you have a question for the speaker, you can use the Q&A box that I just mentioned. With these housekeeping items out of the way, let's get started with our presentation. Our presenters today are Dan Rivera, Aruba Product Solution Manager for K-12, and John Harrington, CEO for Funds for Learning. Dan joined Aruba in January 2015 as a product marketing manager for primary education. For over 25 years, Dan has held a career in the information technology industry with a focus in the primary education sector. Funds for Learning was founded in 1997. In his role as Chief Executive Officer, John manages the daily operations of the nation's first and largest E-rate compliance services firm. Mr. Harrington and his firm provide service to E-rate stakeholders nationwide and has helped schools and libraries apply for $1.9 billion in E-rate funding to support 21st century communication infrastructures. At this time, I'm going to turn things over to Dan to begin the presentation.
Thank you very much, Chris, and thank you everyone else for joining today as we talk about the E-rate program, how it's changing both in the 2020 year and really what's coming down in 2021 and beyond. So as we go in through this, as Chris said, if you do have questions, please use that Q&A box. Peter Kaplan, who is the Aruba National Channel E-rate Manager, he will be able to get those questions to you, get those questions answered. So let's kind of jump into it. As I like to go through what's happening in E-rate, I like to take a step back and think about what's happening in K-12 overall. So we think about what's really going on top of mind for the institutional folks at K-12 and IT and applications. So as we talk about institutional, these are your board of directors, these are your school board officials, this is your superintendent, your assistant soups, really top of mind, digital learning. And it's the transformation away from the traditional teacher, textbook, paper, and pencil to this digital learning, 21st century collaborative learning environment, creating these smart digital spaces to enhance the education, and of course, being able to assess that student success as a result. And not last, but certainly not least, most important is doing it in a safe and secure way. And we talk about school safety as an institutional perspective. That really comes down to more of the physical security, like access control, security cameras, and other things. A little bit different than what the IT top of mind is, right? It's first and foremost cybersecurity, right? It's how do we protect against intrusion? How do we protect that student PII, or that personal identifiable information? And how do we protect against those data breaches? As we've seen, every week coming out this year has been a report of another school being breached, their data being hacked or being taken down. In fact, multiple schools across the US had to delay their opening day because of cybersecurity incidents. What is helping to fuel some of this is not only a specific and deliberate attack by known hacker user groups, but also the growth of IoT devices within the campus, right? And IoT devices are inherently unsecure. So the security is kind of last of thought when these manufacturers are putting out these IoT devices. So the more the IoT devices grow, the more access there is into the network and the more holes in your network security those present. Of course, as you put in those devices, now network capacity becomes an issue on the wired side as well as the wireless, because we continue to see a big push for pervasive Wi-Fi across the campus. If we were to talk about 10 years ago, Wi-Fi on school campus, it was all about coverage. I just need to see the access point. But today that's not enough. Today it's about capacity. I need to make sure that the wireless infrastructure is capable enough to handle the capacity of not only the students, their devices, the administrative, the faculty, all the facilitators, and everyone else coming onto that network, including those IoT devices. The Wi-Fi infrastructure has to handle it all, because that first point of contact is going to be the Wi-Fi network. So that's really kind of what's happening within K-12 right now. And we'd like to launch our first poll question. So in line with the cybersecurity being top of mind for all of your IT directors and network managers and CIOs, how are you securing your network? So if you can take a few seconds, go ahead and check which one applies to you, and you can check them all if they all apply, or check the ones that you're currently using to secure that network, whether it's typical network access control, or if you get down to application security, integrating some kind of user or entity behavior analytics software, or using the enhanced firewalls that are available. So if you can take a minute, vote and let us know how you're securing your network. And hopefully you're checking off one or more of these, as network security is absolutely essential in today's K-12 environment. So we'll give that just a few more seconds, and I think we're ready to close that poll, and we'll move on to the next next topic here. Sorry about that. Okay, so as Chris mentioned at the top of the hour, we are talking about E-rate and the changes coming up, but it is we are proud to sponsor this webinar. And so I'll tell you a little bit about who Aruba is. And simply, we are bridging the physical with the digital. We're helping to create solutions specifically to help educators innovate. And we're creating these types of network solutions, both on the edge to the core, to really revolutionize the user and the IT experiences that you're having. So I'll tell you a little bit about why Aruba would be a good product to take a look at. We were built as a company 16 years ago with mobile first, and we are inherently secure. So as we started, when we talked about mobility, everything was about security. We have unified a wired and wireless management system going from campus to branch to the cloud, from the edge to the core. Single unified wired wireless management system that's capable, and within that, we integrate artificial intelligence, machine-based learning for assurance and agility in our wired and wireless networking. And the great thing is, particularly in a lot of school systems, we are very flexible. We have a lot of solutions that are multi-vendor. Our solutions are API friendly, so you're not locked into just one single vendor. Including with that, going from a different type of infrastructure within Aruba, we have management that could either be on-prem, virtual management, or cloud-based management. And the nice thing is you don't have to rip and replace if you want to change between those management styles. If you start out with cloud and you want to move to an on-premise management, all those products that you've installed can stay, and simply the management changes. You don't have to buy all new products. If you decide that you don't want to pay for a subscription and that subscription ends, you can still continue to use that product. So we want you to know that when we build out all of our solutions, is with longevity and investment projection in mind. And we believe our architecture is much more simple and easy to manage. So let's get into some of these things because it's not for me to say it, but I'm on Aruba's payroll, right? So what does the industry say about Aruba's solutions, our performance in the industry, and what our standing is. So every year there are different groups, whether it's Gartner, Forrester, IDC, do their annual leadership quadrants, and you can see here with Gartner in their Magic Quadrant, 14th year as a leader, top to the right, that quadrant. More specifically within the critical capabilities, whether it's wireless only or wireless with unified communications. And 5 out of those 6 use cases, Aruba is ranked #1. And that's since they've been doing the critical capabilities analysis, we have been that top leaderboard. So it's very excited about that. And of course, with Forrester and the New Wave Wireless Solutions, we're the only vendor placed in that leaders quadrant. And then IDC, again, continues to have us in that leader quadrant. So that's what the analysts say, but it really doesn't do anything without our customers. And so if you're not familiar with Aruba, we are in over 5,800 school systems in the US in E-Rate currently deploying Aruba solutions. We do make specific Aruba education solutions, and these solutions are found in the largest school systems in the US. So whether you have 1,000 students or 86 million students, the Aruba solutions can fit for you. And the reason why we do this, so what are those Aruba solutions? We break it down. We have a wired and wireless, our network infrastructure that is specifically built on the Aruba solution. And then next to that, as you'll see, we have 4 other solution components. We kind of frame and box it out because this will work on the Aruba network infrastructure perfectly. Even better, these are third party. These can work with other manufacturers. So if you have Aruba on your wireless, but you have a competing manufacturer on the wired, you can secure them both with an Aruba solution. If you're running purely a competitive network architecture, you can still secure it. You can still get analytics and assurance, location-based services, and even network management using these Aruba solutions. So of course, we have our wired and wireless infrastructure between our access points, controllers, and switches, but we also have ClearPass, which provides that network security. We have SD-WAN, SD-branch solutions in conjunction with Airwave to provide that network management. And again, these are solutions that will work with even non-Aruba network infrastructure. Then we have our Aruba user experience insight sensors. These are going through to tell you what is on your network and how the network can perform better. And of course, location-based services, really to enhance the user experience, the learning experience on that campus. Why do we do this? It's because digital learning requires that reliability and stability. Not just on the wired, wireless, but everything behind that. So I'm going to get through a couple of these slides. I want you to see that from an Aruba solution, Wi-Fi 6 from the smallest access point to the largest. We have the widest reach of AX access points, including we have a new 387 point-to-point access point. It's not running Wi-Fi 6, it's actually running 802.11ad, but if you have areas where you have portables and you don't want to trench out to it, you can use these point-to-point devices running 802.11ad and get multiple gigs connections across that. On our switching, I do want to take a moment just to let you know we have a brand new switching line, the CX switching. It was introduced about a year ago, but specifically for the core, we've actually introduced a new level of switches that go from the core to the edge. And what does the CX give you? It gives you automated operations, gives you actionable insights by doing network analytics, and it provides one operating model from the edge to the data center. So here's a look at some of those AX switches or CX switches that we have available. And if you have more questions, you can always reach out to us at Aruba. We still offer our campus portfolio as well. Maybe you're not ready to introduce machine-based learning or automated intelligence, but we do have a wide range of switches all the way out to that edge. So from an E-rate eligibility, the eligible services list was just released. So the eligible services for 2020 coming up. Based on those eligible services list, these are the way our solutions break down into eligible and ineligible. So of course, within category 2, internal connections, all of our switches, access points, controllers, and software for that, eligible. The basic maintenance of those internal connections, also eligible. Managed internal broadband services, I will say we do have a managed internal broadband service offering that we call that Green Lake for Aruba, which provides your two ways of doing it, whether you're just managing the equipment that you're purchasing under internal connections or you already own, or that managed internal broadband solution includes the network as a service or wireless as a service, that lease of that equipment included in that management price. What is not eligible? So our security products, whether it's ClearPass, Airwave, NetInsight, those user experience sensors, and our location-based services, those are not eligible under the E-rate program for 2020. So I do want to let you know that we do have specific K-12 bundles. If you're looking at a wireless controller solution, this is going to be the most cost-effective, efficient way to buy a controller with the licenses. The nice thing about these controller bundles, they are 100% eligible, and they include not just the controller and the license pack, but also includes the first year of support. We also have a K-12 license for Airwave, which is our network management system. It's heavily discounted, but that is not E-rate eligible. Just want to point that out. Under 2020, that network management is not E-rate eligible under internal connections. We also have an Aruba Central promotion available. It's essentially 5 years of that central management at a really aggressive price. So you can find out more about that by shooting us an email or go out to arubanetworks.com. With that, let's talk about what's going on within E-rate and specifically in 2020 and beyond. So I'd like to introduce to you John Harrington from Funds for Learning. John, take it away.
Hi, Dan. It's a pleasure to be here with you. And I just want to thank Aruba for such a timely webinar. With the rules just coming out last week, we are all trying to assimilate what the FCC has given us and really get the lay of the land going into year 2020 and beyond. So just really appreciate the opportunity to be here with you today. And before we get started, I think we have a poll question. Is that right? What percentage of your network infrastructure budget is dependent on E-rate? So 75 to 100%, 50 to 75%, 25 to 50%, or less than 25%. So what percentage of your network infrastructure budget is dependent on E-rate? Okay. Well, let's just jump into funding year 2020. You can see here our poll results. About 30% of you say that 75 to 100% of your network infrastructure budget is reliant upon E-rate. Another 28% or so, 50% or more. Right there, those two numbers really, I think, tell the biggest part of this story. About 2/3 of us today are saying, hey, at least 50% or more of our budget is dependent upon E-rate. And that is certainly not atypical. That's it's what we see consistently, that most schools, most libraries really look to the E-rate program for the lion's share of the support for network infrastructure. And that is why it's so important that we understand the rules. And just so you know, the agenda for today's presentation, it's really divided into two segments. One for the year 2020, funding year 2020, and then the other for funding year 2021 and beyond. We're going to spend less time on that, but it's important sort of where we're going. But in the meantime, we have one very critical funding year in front of us, the year 2020, and that's where we really want to spend a lot of our time so that you can capture those critical infrastructure dollars. So what's all this fuss about? Well, beginning last week, the FCC made permanent the Category 2 budget system. Remember, Category 2 refers to the discount system for network electronics, for wireless access points, data cabling, wiring, all the infrastructure that is on campus at a school or a library facility. And what most people didn't realize is that for the last 5 years, we have been in a trial period using the so-called Category 2 budget system. Before that, there was something called the priority system, and the FCC recognized that that wasn't the way to go, and now they've made permanent this budget system that we've all been operating under. That will be the law of the land going forward. That is the default, de facto approach to on-campus funding for the E-rate program from here forward. And that's very important because it provides applicants with a reliable source of funding, a predictable source of funding that they can then use for that network infrastructure we just talked about. One of the goals of the E-rate program, and really one of the goals for the FCC under Chairman Pai, is they want to encourage long-term planning, effective planning for technology, and that really requires having the faith, the assurance that those dollars will be there. Not only are they there, but they're there when you need them the most. It's important to point out that the old 2 out of 5 rule that some of you may be familiar with if you've been involved with the E-rate program, or the discount threshold system, those are gone. If you don't know what I just said, you don't understand those, that's okay. You can just delete that. But one thing I know is since these rules have come out, we've been getting a lot of questions about these 2 old rules, and just really want to make sure that for any of you old timers involved in the E-rate program for more than say 5 or 6 years, those are now gone, and we are clearly and cleanly into the Category 2 budget system, never to go back to that other way of operating. Okay, so let's look in a little more detail at funding year 2020. A great way to think about 2020 is to think of it as the 6th year of the Category 2 trial period. When the FCC created the new rules for Category 2 in 2015, for the 2015 funding year, it was a trial. That trial period went for 5 years, and they've now come out and said, okay, it's going to be, we're going to make this thing permanent, but we're going to extend that trial period by 1 more year in order for us to get ready for the long-term system. So if you've been doing E-rate, and for example, you filled out an application in 2015, the 2020 funding year is going to be very similar. It's just a 6th year, an extra year of where we have been. So there are not a ton of new rules, fortunately, really, that you even have to get your arms around. It's kind of a continuation of where we've been for one last year. The site budgets that we have been using since 2015 are still in place. Each site, each school, each library building will have a Category 2 budget. As has already been mentioned, the eligible services list has been released for 2020, and that has remained unchanged, much to our chagrin, but that's another webinar. And all of the other mechanics of the program, for example, the equipment transfer rules stay the same in 2020. There are some adjustments to that in 2021. We'll get to that in a moment, but for now, you can really just think of the funding year 2020 as an extension of where we've been without very many significant changes. Now, there are some important differences that you need to be aware of going into this next year. One is that the FCC, understanding that they're stretching this trial period by another year, have been very generous and increased everyone's budget by 20% for the budget factors. Understanding that now this is a 6-year trial period instead of a 5-year, they had to sort of stretch the dollars out. And what does that look like? Well, for the budget floor, that's the minimum budget that any given school or library site qualifies for. The floor has been increased by 20%. We estimate that it will be $11,998. I say estimate because the precise numbers have not been published yet. They're tied to some inflationary factors, and so those numbers are not out, but it'll be approximately around $11,998 is the budget floor for any school site, the minimum budget it will qualify for during the trial period. For school sites, the per student budget factor will be $195.63, we estimate. And for libraries, there are two different factors. Remember, there's a rural library per square foot factor and then an urban library per square foot factor. For the rural libraries, we estimate that will be $2.99 per square foot to calculate their maximum Category 2 budget. For urban libraries, that maximum amount will be $6.52 per square foot. If you want to know how much the available budget is for a particular site, all you have to do is calculate the maximum budget using those factors. So you'll look at, for example, the number of students you have, calculate the total budget for that site, and then subtract any funds that have been committed or even requested for that site from 2015 to 2019. And the difference there will be how much money you have available in 2020. This is a fantastic opportunity, especially for sites that have not used much of their Category 2 budget. If a site has not used any funding from 2015 to 2019, that school site will have $195.63 per student to spend in 2020 as the maximum budget amount. That's pretty remarkable. So rather than just describe math, I'll kind of take you through a few examples. So on this next slide, what you'll see is a particular example for a site that includes 300 students. And let's assume that that site qualifies for an 80% E-rate discount. That site budget in this case would be equal to $58,689. How do you get that? Well, it's the maximum of the budget floor. Remember, we're estimating that to be $11,998, and or the per student calculation. 300 students, full-time enrolled students, times that per student factor of $195.63. That gives a number of $58,689. It's underlined there. That is the maximum. That's the larger of those two numbers. So that would be the site budget for this school in 2020. Now, let's assume that looking back over the 2015 to 2019 period, that this school had a Category 2 utilization of its budgets of $20,000. So let's see, oops. If it had $20,000 utilized from 2015 to 2019, then its available budget would be $38,689. So $58,689 minus $20,000 already utilized would leave a balance of $38,689 for that site. And of course, that is its overall budget. It qualifies for an 80% discount in this example, which equates to E-rate discounts of $30,951.20. We just walk through this math again very quickly because this is really the heart of what you need to be doing. This is your homework assignment for the next few weeks, is understanding the Category 2 budgets that are available at your school or library sites in 2020. So again, this example, we've got 300 students at a school site with an 80% discount. You sort of run the numbers, you figure out what the maximum budget would be, and then you deduct the Category 2 funds that you've already received, and that's what gives you your overall budget that's available in 2020, and from that you can calculate your estimated E-rate discount. So in this case, because they'd already received $20,000 in Category 2 funds over the years, they've got $38,689 available, which equates to an E-rate discount of $30,951. Let's look at one more example. As I said, I hate to do math like this in a PowerPoint presentation, but it's just so important that we all kind of understand. Let's assume that there's a school site with 50 students. So this is a very small school facility in terms of the number of students. It qualifies for a 60% discount. In this case, that site would utilize the budget floor of $11,998. Why is that? Well, if you take 50 students times the $195.63 per student budget factor, the greater of those two numbers is $11,998. So about $12,000 is the maximum budget for this particular site. And if we look back at 2015 through 2019 and see that there's been no category 2 expenditures, no utilization of funds for this site, then that means that full budget is available for this facility. Assuming that there's a 60% discount for this school, that would leave them with a available E-rate discount of $7,198.80. So the key here is not to just make our brains hurt with math. It's just understanding what the category 2 discounts are at each facility, each location in your school district or your library system is going to really set the stage for your success in 2020, leveraging this very unique funding year in which we have kind of one set of extra dollars, if you will, before the new rules kick in 2021. After 2020, all the budgets that we just talked about will be reset. So the school site that had $38,000 in potential budget available, or that smaller school that had almost $12,000 in budget available to it, all of those will be reset in 2021. It's very much a use it or lose it opportunity in 2020. Now, that doesn't mean you should just go out and spend money to spend money. Of course not. But to the extent that you have need, that there are projects, infrastructure that is required at your school or library facilities, you have a tremendous opportunity in 2020 to really bolster that infrastructure with discounts, using those budgets that are going to disappear and be reset at the beginning of 2021. So there's no consequence, there's no downside, if you will, for using those budget dollars in 2020, because those coffers will sort of reset in 2021. Every site in America, for the most part, has additional category 2 budget in 2020. Most schools are receiving an extra $32.61 per student, whether they've used funds or not going back to 2015. One very unique aspect of all of this has to do with urban libraries. Urban libraries will actually have a lower budget factor in 2021. In 2020, because of that 20% increase, that 1 year, one-time increase, the budget factor for urban libraries is $6.52 per square foot. Beginning in 2021, that budget will reset and it will go to $4.50. So urban libraries, if you're listening, 2020, if you've ever considered using E-rate, 2020 is a really good year to do so because you've got the maximum budget that you're most likely will ever have. So estimate your site budgets now. When you're planning for 2020, remember that you are really planning for July 1st, 2020 through September 30th of 2021. In fact, the discounts can start as early as April 1st of 2020, but that time frame extends into 2021. When you calculate that budget, when you estimate what it will be for a school site or a library location, ask yourself, what do we need at that site and what will we need by September 30th of 2021? And that's what you can apply for this year. Now, let's talk about 2021. Let's talk about what the permanent Category 2 system looks like going into 2021 and beyond. And this is a very positive step forward for the program. The revised Category 2 system will really build on the lessons learned from the last 5 years, or what will have been 6 years by that point. There are new options for calculating your budget and also for how those budgets are administered. There's going to be new budget factors, the new budget floor, the minimum budget available at a site will be $25,000. The student budget multiplier will be set at $167, and the library budget multiplier will be unified, only one factor now for both rural and urban schools or libraries, and that will be set at $4.50 per square foot. And remember, that is the one that for urban libraries is actually declining. Those budget amounts will be calculated for a 5-year period, and then there are going to be recurring 5-year cycles. The first one begins in 2021 and runs through 2025. The next period will start in 2026, and so on. It's important to note that there is no rollover of budget balances from cycle to cycle. So in much the same way that at the end of 2020, if you've not used those budgets, they go away and they're replaced. That will be the process. That's what the year 2025 will look like. That's what the year 2030 will look like. There will not be any spillover or rollover of budget balances from one cycle to the next, which will encourage applicants to really think long and hard about how they use those budget funds during that time frame. The budget factors themselves will be reset only once per period. So those dollar amounts that I listed up there, the budget floor, the per student budget multiplier, the library per square foot multiplier, those are the factors that will be in place from 2021 to 2025. And in fact, your school or your library budget will be set at the beginning of 2021, and that's the budget you had to work with for that entire period. So it's not going to fluctuate. You're going to have a set budget that you can really plan around for that entire time period. A big improvement is the flexibility to use budget dollars where you see the most need, where there is the most opportunity to deploy equipment, to upgrade networks. Each school district or library system will have a system-wide budget that is calculated for all of their facilities. So if you are a multi-site school, you will calculate a single budget that then you can allocate across your sites. One of the frustrations that most applicants have had with the current system is seeing when they've used all the budget funds at one location and knowing that they need more dollars there, and having other schools that didn't need quite as much. Maybe it was a more modern facility, a newer building, so it didn't need as much upgrading, but those dollars could not be transferred to a more expensive, perhaps an older school facility that needed a little more work. Well, now under this new system-wide budget, you as an applicant will be in charge of that budget. You as an applicant will have the opportunity to allocate those funds, to put the dollars where they are needed most. And that is going to be a real help to schools and libraries that almost every school district we think will benefit from having that sort of flexibility to really put the dollars where they need it most, and ultimately to reduce the disparity between sites. If it's one thing I hear from CIOs, time and time again, it's the need to have that consistent experience, consistent levels of technology in each of those facilities. And it's very hard to do that when you don't have the ability to move E-rate dollars from site to site. When you calculate your budget, you will sum the individual site budgets. So you'll go through, let's say you have 10 school sites. You will calculate that site budget in much the same manner as what I demonstrated before for 2020. Sort of look at the budget floor amount, you multiply the enrollment times this per student factor, and then you look to see which of those is the most. And you'll calculate that site by site by site, and then you add all that up, and that gives you your overall system budget that you can then use to serve all of your school locations. If you are a large applicant, and by large, according to the FCC, you are 11 sites or more. If you have 11 sites or more, your discount budget calculation is a little different. In fact, they've kind of reduced the options for these larger applicants. Instead of adding up each site's discount or looking at each site's maximum budget level, you've got two options. One is to take your total enrollment times the number, that per student factor, and see what that dollar amount goes to, or take the number of sites that you have, multiply it by the budget floor, and then you just pick which one of those is higher. So you don't do the site by site, pick the individual sites maximum budget and then add those up. You just do one big master calculation for your school district based on either the total enrollment or the number of sites. And for libraries, it would be the total square footage of all your buildings or the budget floor. This particular requirement only applies to a small percentage of applicants. We estimate about 12% of school district applicants will fall into this category, and about 14% of libraries will fall into this, will have this reduced set of options. But for the majority of applicants, they'll have the most flexibility. They can actually calculate site by site what would give them the most budget and then add those numbers up. Okay, let's, before I go through all the slides, let's look at just a few other changes that have taken place. It's important to note that non-instructional facilities are treated the same way under the new and improved program as they were previously, or as they currently are. So non-instructional facilities are ineligible for support. When you have infrastructure at a non-instructional facility, you must cost allocate that infrastructure and eliminate it from any E-rate discounts. The only exception to that is if it is shared infrastructure that is supporting schools or libraries throughout your community, in which case you have to demonstrate that, hey, this is a shared network switch, it's serving these schools, it's not serving this non-instructional facility. So that's the exception to that. Otherwise, non-instructional facilities do not qualify for Category 2 discounts. That's always been the case, and that will continue to be the case. Something else that's changed is that the equipment transfer rules have been refined. I've said eliminated here on this slide. They've eliminated certain requirements and others still remain. Beginning in 2021, you are allowed to move equipment without any concern of how long it has been there. Today and into 2020, the FCC expects equipment to be at a particular site for 3 years before it can be relocated, moved. Beginning with equipment that is purchased with 2021 funding commitments, that requirement will no longer be there. You can move it after a week. You can move it after 6 months or a year. You don't have to wait the full 3 years. Even so, it is important that you continue to track those assets. Understand that the FCC is very much interested in confirming that those dollars are being spent, that they're being spent for educational purposes. So if you are audited, if your application has been funded, you received equipment, there's a good chance that at some point someone's going to come out and say, hey, where's that wireless access point? And you'll still need to be able to account for all of that equipment. However, you may not have it at the same location where it was originally delivered. You just have to be able to show that you still have it, where it was moved, and so on. But this has been an area that's been a frustration for applicants, and it's a common sense, no-brainer improvement to the program. There are some other little changes. For example, the budget factors are now going to be rounded to the nearest cent. That's the sort of thing that when we get to that point, it'll be an interesting fact, but it's not something that's particularly relevant to our discussion today. So the main things you need to know have to do with the 2020 change, and then the 2020 extension of the trial period, and then the 2021 new set of rules. So speaking of funding years, then it kind of creates a very interesting time frame here. And our third poll question is, what year do you plan on doing a wired or a wireless network refresh? So right now you're looking at your network. What are you thinking about? Are you looking at doing a refresh or an upgrade in 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, or beyond. So just enter your solution there. And what I find particularly interesting about this question is the fact that not each of these years, there's a distinction between 2020 and 2021. If you are if you're at a school that has used most of its 2021 funds, or most of its budget between 2015 and 2019, you may not be as interested at doing a refresh in 2020. You may be looking to that 2021 through 2023 and beyond. And in fact, that's it looks to be that about 79% of you are looking at 2021 or beyond for doing upgrades. And that doesn't surprise me because most of the Category 2 funds, a significant portion of them, have already been utilized. And what does that mean? Number one is Category 2 budgets are lower for those sites that have already used those dollars. And also, if you have upgraded your equipment, you can't just move it willy-nilly. You have to wait at least 3 years to move it. And so it makes sense that you may be looking at a 2021 or later deployment for that equipment. So with that, I think I'm going to invite Dan Rivera to join us. Dan?
Hey, John. Yeah, thank you. And thank you for that information. A lot happening in 2020 as well as in 2021 and beyond. So thank you for that. It looks like we have a lot of questions out there. I know Peter Kaplan has been feverishly answering a lot of the questions behind the scenes, but there's still a couple of them. There's actually still quite a few coming in. So I'd like to invite Peter, if you can jump on. What questions are open right now that we can ask John, or some other questions that maybe someone asked that I think we need to bring to the broader audience here. So Peter?
Okay, great. So here's an open question for John Harrington. Doesn't the budget floor calculation when calculating district-wide budgets only apply to school districts that have 10 or less entities in their district? Am I mistaken? So John, can you explain how that works?
Yes. We have really two scenarios that we're talking about. So let's start with a larger school district that has 11 sites or 11 or more sites. For that school district, they are going to do two calculations. They're going to first of all take their full-time enrollment. Let's say they have 5,000 students. They'll take that 5,000 students times the per student factor, and that will give them their system-wide budget based on the student enrollment. They will also take the total number of sites in their school district. So let's say it's 11. Well, that'd be a lot of students per building. So let's say it's 20. They'll take 20 times that $25,000 budget floor. And they'll have two numbers, the per student, and then in essence, the per building. And then they will take the larger of the two. So every school district will look at both the student factor and the budget factor. In the case of larger school districts with 11 sites or more, those are their two options. So they'll run the numbers for their full-time enrollment. They'll run the numbers based on the number of buildings that they have, and then they get to choose between the two of them. Now, for smaller school districts, those with 10 sites or fewer, they have the option to then, instead of one or the other, they can look at each building and do that process. What's the budget floor number? 25,000. Okay, what's it based off the per student? And they can designate that number site by site and then tally those. But in all cases, everyone's sort of looking at the budget floor. My guess is that for the overall school districts with 11 or more sites, that it would be very rare that the budget floor is that aggregate budget floor, the per building budget floor is what drives their budget. It will most likely be the per student count. So that it's, I really want to mention that is for 2021. You know, that site, the budget floor is $25,000 beginning in 2021. So there's a lot of ground to cover between here and there. And in my presentation, I intentionally sort of kept that shorter even, because the real action, I think, is understanding where things are for 2020 and knowing that those dollars expire. Now, for those of you that were considering an upgrade in 2021, there's two things I would challenge you to do. Number one is remember that the 2020 funding year extends into the summer of 2021 up to September 30th of 2021. If you have sites that have Category 2 budgets, significant Category 2 budgets for 2020, you can go ahead and procure that, get that contract in place, and actually do the project in 2021 using your funding year 2020 budget. The other thing you can do is sort of think about those things together. There is an overlap, the end of funding year 2020 and the beginning of funding year 2021 overlapped by several months. You could go out and procure something that, a contract that's in place that leverages both the 2020 and 2021 dollars to really get a huge bang for your buck in terms of deploying equipment and so on. So really think about what your budgets are, look at what 2020 budgets are, and then think about the timeframes and how it butts up against the 2020 funding year or 2021 funding year. Okay, Peter?
Great. So I have a question tied to managed Wi-Fi. Do you think that more applicants will turn to this kind of type of solution now that the FCC has made this a permanent part of the E-rate program? And what services are eligible as part of the MIBs?
Okay, so I'll kind of take this from an E-rate perspective, and then Dan, I don't know, you may want to step in a little bit more, you know, from your side. I'll just say from an E-rate perspective, we have seen a sort of a slow but steady increase in the number of applicants that are turning to MIBs. I do think the fact that it's been made permanent will encourage applicants to do so. As you know, as a school official, it's important that you can rely on something. And I think the newness of the managed Wi-Fi, the MIB solutions, and some of the regulatory uncertainties has held it back a bit. And so I would imagine that there will be a continuing increase in that, to the extent that, for the same reason that many school districts are interested in outsourcing other types of services and resources, that for many, it might make sense to turn to that sort of solution, and knowing that the E-rate program will support it too. Dan, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, only to say I'm in complete agreement with you, John. And I think over the last few years, since 2015, when MIBs, or that managed internal broadband services, were first introduced, a lot of schools hesitated, right? A lot of systems would hesitate to say, okay, well, I know I can buy the equipment today and I own it, right? But if I sign into this managed services and I sign a multi-year contract, this is a test period from the FCC. So even though year after year from 2015 beyond, we always got funded, is this going to continue to be a part of the program, or is this going to expire because it's only temporary? So I think now that I think you're correct. Now the FCC has made it a permanent part of the program. I think we'll see more and more schools looking to either augment their own network services with some managed services provided by their service provider, or even move to a network as a service, which is, obviously a much more all-in approach to that managed services. So I do think we'll see a stronger utilization as we mature into this program, but I think the move by the FCC, making that a permanent part of our program, certainly helps.
Great. So this question is for John Harrington. So there are currently hundreds of millions of dollars still pending for 2019. What would you suggest that an applicant or even a service provider do that still has funding still pending at USAC possibly speed up the process of getting a commitment?
The sarcastic, facetious response is pray. You know, if you're the actual response includes also things like reaching out to USAC, contacting the reviewer, not just the application reviewer staff, but the actual USAC staff in Washington, D.C. If you have gone to any of the USAC trainings, there's a good chance that you have met or heard from some of those USAC officials. They are consistently saying, hey, reach out to me, send me an email. And I have found that they work very hard to respond to those requests, those inquiries. You may not be able to just break that application free. At a minimum, though, you should be able to find out what the cause of the delay is. It could be that they are waiting for you to respond, to provide some information, and you're not aware of that. Sometimes, you know, the contact information changes and so on. I always encourage applicants to be very upfront, to be their own advocates, and don't be afraid to reach out to USAC, reach out to the PIA reviewers to ask them frequently, call them weekly, to free those, to get those applications moving. Many times the squeaky wheel effect is real, and you can do so politely, but assertively. And that's the most important thing. Something else I would encourage you to do, if you find yourself in that position, if you find yourself perhaps in a position where it's so far delayed now that your plans may have even changed, you might want to regroup and look at your 2020 application, either resubmitting that contract, or maybe if you can, canceling it, going out. There's different variations depending upon the specific situation, but really got to think about how you get that 2019 funding committed, and or how do you pivot to the 2020 funding year?
Thank you very much, John. I know we only have a couple of minutes left before the top of the hour. I do want to go back on something you had said before, because there are some questions on eligibility and adding products. And I know this year in 2020, they explicitly said no, they were not going to add any additional products. But didn't some of the commissioners leave it room for things like network security for 2021 and kind of beyond?
Yeah, I think there's a very strong likelihood that beginning in 2021, that network security, additional network security functions will be eligible. They sort of signal that, as you mentioned, in the comments from the FCC staff, and I would be very I would not be surprised at all to see that, because it is just now becoming, as you pointed out, it's every week. It's not so much a matter of some additional bell or whistle. It's really just about keeping the network up and running. And the FCC is all about that. And I think that because of the timing of this particular new set of rules and the need to get that out quickly, I think kind of the play clock was against us in them processing changes to the eligible services list. But the fact that they even threw it out there is a very good indication that it will come about. And so I think it's up to individual applicants. I think it's up to the vendors. I think it's up to manufacturers like Aruba to continue to make that case. And I believe that we're very close to that happening. And the other calculus here is the fact that we've got a presidential election. Depending upon the outcome of that, there's most likely going to be changes at the FCC, really even regardless of who is in the White House. Those top spots, Chairman Pai will not stay on as chairman indefinitely. So we expect that there will be changes in the leadership. And I think at that point, there's a very good likelihood that we'll start to see a few of those other pieces come to play, which would be really positive.
I agree. That's fantastic. And of course, before we let everyone go, I want to know that there are some resource links you can go to, whether it's the Aruba E-rate page or Funds for Learning page, and you can find out what your Category 2 budget is. They have a great calculator right on their page, so you can determine what your remaining budget is. And then, of course, you can go to subscribe for their E-rate news and analysis on the Funds for Learning site as well. And of course, the USAC webpage, as you'll see here. I know we do have a few more questions still that we have not been able to get to. I want to assure you we will get back to you on those questions, but I'm going to have to turn that back over to Chris, and I just want to say thank you very much, John, and thank you, Peter, for everything, and Chris, back to you.
Thank you, Dan. I'd like to thank our presenters today for a very informative presentation, and I'd like to thank all the audience members for joining us as well. As a reminder, you'll get an email within the next few days that contains a link to this recording, along with the slide. Thanks again for participating, and have a great day.